My beloved, there are moments you carry in silence that no one else sees. Moments that try to rip you apart from the inside, slowly, like a quiet unraveling. Not all pain is loud. Some of it settles into the background like a permanent echo, a whisper that tells you something broke, and maybe it can't be fixed. But I was there. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. And today I'm not coming to ignore those places. I'm coming to redeem them. Because what tried to break you isn't the end of your story. It's the soil I'm planting something in. Let me be clear. I did not cause the harm. I didn't orchestrate the betrayal. I didn't will the wound. But I saw it coming, and even in the thick of it, I never left your side. You may have looked around and wondered why I didn't intervene the way you hoped. You may have cried out, "For me," and felt no answer. You may have questioned if I turned my face away. But I need you to know this. I wasn't distant. I was digging deeper, beneath the surface, beneath the breaking. I was preparing the ground for a strength that couldn't be shaken, not performance, not pretense, but real, sacred, steady strength. You survived things that had the power to steal your breath. And even when the world moved on, even when people forgot what you endured, I didn't. I still remember the moment your heart split and you pretended to be okay. I remember the night you couldn't sleep because your mind kept replaying what you couldn't change. I remember the ache in your chest when no one asked how you were really doing. You showed up anyway. You smiled anyway, you served anyway, but I saw behind the mask. I held the version of you that trembled when the doors were shut, and I kept you alive, not just physically, but spiritually. When you were too numb to pray, too angry to worship, too tired to try again, I stood guard over your soul, because I knew something you didn't know yet. I would use what tried to break you. You don't have to understand how I do it. You just have to know that I will. I don't discard broken things. I don't avoid mess. I enter it. I step into the pain with you, not to remind you of it, but to repurpose it. There's no crack too wide for my light, no fracture too deep for my restoration. You think your pain disqualifies you? It qualifies you, not for performance, but for presence, for compassion, for wisdom, for healing, for legacy. Your tears have watered a ground that is about to grow something holy. I don't waste what you walked through. I turn every shattered piece into a mosaic of grace. You've been asking, even if not aloud, what was the point of all of this? And while I won't minimize the cost, while I won't pretend it didn't hurt, I will show you something higher. I will show you that what the enemy meant to use as a grave, I will use as a garden. That's who I am. That's what I do. And this is not the end. This is the beginning. Not a repeat. Not a return to what was, but a rebuilding on stronger ground. This new foundation isn't made of applause or certainty. It's made of endurance, trust, resilience, and the unshakable truth that you are still here, still breathing, still chosen. You may not feel strong, that's okay. Your strength isn't in how loud you shout your faith, it's in how you whispered, "Help," when no one else heard. Your strength is in the decision to keep waking up, to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when it felt pointless, even when no one applauded, even when it didn't feel spiritual. I saw every moment. I measured every sigh. I caught every tear, and I never once stopped counting you worthy. Let me remind you of something eternal. I do not love you because you endured. I loved you through the endurance. I loved you before it. I love you after it. Nothing you went through made you more precious to me. You were always priceless. But now, there's a weight in your spirit that wasn't there before, a depth that only pain can teach, a softness that only suffering can shape. And this sacred soil of your healing, This is what I will use to grow fruit that lasts. Not for performance, not for popularity, but for purpose. So let me say it again, in the tone your soul can finally believe. I will use what tried to break you. Not because I need to prove anything, but because you were never meant to be wasted. You were never meant to be discarded. I have always had a plan for you, and not 1 ounce of your pain will go unused in the story I'm still telling through you. There is more. There is healing. There is beauty ahead. And no matter what tried to bury you, I have already declared, you will rise. You've asked questions you didn't dare say out loud. You've wondered in the quiet corners of your thoughts, if this was allowed to happen, does that mean I'm not as called as I once believed? Does that mean I missed something? Maybe I failed to hear you. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to hold what you gave me. But child, that's the voice of grief speaking, not the voice of truth. The trauma made you question your clarity. The pain clouded your memory. But hear me, your calling hasn't been canceled. It's being clarified, refined, not removed. I never needed you to walk through life untouched by hardship. I needed you to stay with me when it got hard, and you did. Even when you pulled away emotionally, even when you got tired of praying the same unanswered prayers, even when your faith felt more like survival than belief, you stayed. You stayed in the room. You stayed in the process. And that was enough for me to keep building. Now I'm peeling back the lies you picked up along the way. Lies that settled in like unwanted guests during the nights you cried yourself to sleep. Lies that said, you're too fragile now. You're too marked. Too weary. Too damaged. But those are distortions born from sorrow, not declarations from heaven. You are not fragile. You are tempered. And the fire didn't destroy you. It strengthened your metal. Yes, there are cracks in you now. But cracks don't cancel value. They make room for glory. You've seen how pain isolates. It made you pull back from people, from your own voice, from your future. It convinced you that retreat was safer, that maybe invisibility would hurt less than trying again. So you hid. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere inside, you stopped believing there was still space for you. You thought maybe your chapter had ended early. Maybe you already peaked. Maybe what's ahead could never be as bright as what you lost. But let me say this gently and firmly. I'm not done writing. What you saw as the final page was only a pause, and the part of your story that comes next won't be about bouncing back to who you were. It will be about rising forward into who you're becoming. You are not the same person who entered the storm, and that's the point. What I'm calling you into now requires a different depth, one you only found when everything else fell away. What tried to break, you removed the surface layers, and now we're down to the foundation. And that's where I'm building. I know you lost things you never thought you'd lose. Relationships, opportunities, trust, time, pieces of yourself you're still trying to gather. But I also know what you didn't lose. You didn't lose your capacity to feel. You didn't lose your ability to love. You didn't lose your desire to be whole again. You didn't lose me. And those remaining embers, however small, are enough. Let me blow on them. Let me turn the smoke into fire again. Not for performance, not for display, but for warmth, for light, for clarity. You may feel like you've been disqualified, but I see something else. I see a heart that has been purified. I see someone who can no longer be easily fooled, someone who knows the cost of compassion, someone who can now lead without needing applause, someone who's learned to be faithful in private before ever being seen in public. And I say again, that is enough. You don't have to go back to what was. You don't have to become the version of you that existed before the breaking. I'm not rebuilding that version. I'm resurrecting someone new. And yes, resurrection always requires something to die first. Expectations, illusions, comfort, control, maybe even certain relationships. But death is not the end in my kingdom. It's the soil of rebirth. And what comes out of this season won't look like the version of success you used to imagine. It will look truer. It will look like peace that can't be shaken, like hope that holds even on silent nights, like a gentleness that carries weight, like love that doesn't fracture under pressure. You will be a living testimony, not in theory, not in doctrine, but in breath and in blood. So stop waiting to feel ready. I'm not asking for your confidence. I'm asking for your surrender. I don't need you to be certain about the future. I need you to say yes again. One more time, even if your yes is trembling. Even if it's small, I can build on that. I always have. I built creation with words. I can rebuild your life with one whispered yes. You're not forgotten. You're not overlooked. You're not passed by. You're protected. I've hidden you on purpose. Not to exile you, but to prepare you. Because when I reintroduce you, you won't be performing. You'll be overflowing. What once drained you will now become what fuels you. What once silenced you will now become the place of your greatest clarity. And what once broke you will now be the place where others come to be healed. There's something I want you to see now. Something you've been too close to notice. The battle you faced wasn't just about what happened to you. It was about what I placed inside you long before the pain ever arrived. The enemy wasn't just trying to hurt you. He was trying to shut you down. He saw the authority you carry. He saw the ripple effect of your voice, your presence, your love. He saw what you would become if you healed. And that terrified him. So he tried to cut you off at the root, not with one massive blow, but with slow, strategic wounds meant to wear you down over time. He planted doubts in the cracks of your disappointment. He used familiar voices to shake your confidence. He whispered through loss, through betrayal, through delay. See? You're not as called as you thought. You're not as protected as you hoped. You're not as loved as you believed. But those were not my words. And now I'm exposing the lies that were wrapped in false logic. The half-truths that sounded just close enough to reason that you didn't see the trap. I'm pulling them out one by one, not to shame you, but to set you free. You've carried a hidden heaviness for so long that you forgot it wasn't supposed to be there. You adjusted your posture to accommodate pain. You lowered your voice to avoid rejection. You trimmed your dreams to keep others comfortable. And I grieved with you, not because you were weak, but because I never created you to shrink. You weren't designed to contort yourself for survival. You were designed to abide, to expand, to flourish. But when pain taught you to expect rejection, you began living in constant anticipation of loss. And that anticipation became a lens, one that clouded even the good moments with fear. But I'm clearing that lens now. I'm reminding you that not everyone will walk away, that not every open door will close, that not every season will end in disappointment. You're allowed to hope again, and more than that, you're allowed to walk forward with boldness again. Not the boldness that performs, the boldness that belongs, the kind that says, even if I'm still healing, I have something to carry, something sacred, something weighty, something that no wound could erase. Because here is what the enemy didn't count on. You're still here, and not only are you still here, you're beginning to see again, to feel again, to dream again. That flicker in your spirit, that warmth that rises when you imagine a future that doesn't hurt, that's me. That's not fantasy, it's foretelling. That's me resurrecting what grief tried to bury. That's me restoring the edges of your vision. You don't have to brace for the worst anymore. I'm building something in you that won't collapse under pressure. I'm teaching you to stand on a healed foundation, not a masked one. You see, I never needed you to bounce back quickly. I needed you to go deep. I needed you to stay long enough in the quiet so that when I whispered again, you'd recognize my voice without the noise of old expectations. The healing I'm doing isn't surface level. It's generational. It's foundational. It's meant to outlast the trends and storms. That's why it's taking time. That's why it feels different. Because I'm not just giving you recovery, I'm giving you roots. And those roots, they are starting to anchor you, not in fear, not in shame, in truth, in identity, in me. You are no longer defined by what broke you. You are no longer limited by what hurt you. Your story is not the story of someone who barely survived. It's the story of someone who was transformed, deeply, deliberately, divinely. There's a weight on your life now, a holy weight, and it's not too much. It's just right, because it was custom formed through fire and grace. And don't underestimate what I'm preparing in the hidden place. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's empty. Just because the applause stopped doesn't mean the anointing did. This season has been sacred, even if it's felt strange. You thought you were being passed over, but I was positioning you. You thought you were being benched, but I was restoring your strength. And now, what was once a hiding place is about to become a launching ground. But you won't launch in panic. You won't run in desperation. You will walk in rhythm. With me, with peace, with knowing. So take a breath, and not just to calm yourself, but to receive again, to allow yourself to be filled. You've spent so much energy trying to hold everything together, but now, I want you to let me hold you. I'm not waiting for you to prove you're whole before I use you. I'm using you as I heal you. I'm speaking through the cracks, shining through the scars. I'm anointing the very places the enemy tried to shame. And I'm doing it not in secret anymore, but in clarity, in light, in power. The ones who saw your fall will now witness your rise, not in pride, but in presence, not in spectacle, but in steady glory. And when they ask, "How did you make it through?" you'll smile, not with arrogance, but with reverence, and say, "Because he stayed, and I did, and I still am, and I will use what tried to break you." I want you to pause for a moment, not just physically, but deep within your soul, and feel what is beginning to settle inside you. This is not simply relief that the storm has passed. It's not just gratitude that you made it through. What you're sensing is something far more profound, a shift in identity. Because what once tried to define you by your breaking will now reveal you through your becoming. You are not the same as before, and that is not a loss. It's a victory. There is wisdom now where only reaction used to live. There is discernment now where there used to be overexposure. There is sacred stillness now in places that were once filled with striving. These are not small things. These are miracles. Because transformation is not just measured in what others can see. It is revealed in the quiet places where your inner life no longer agrees with lies. And you, beloved, have stopped agreeing with the lie that says your pain was proof of my absence. Let's name it together. How easy it was to equate the absence of intervention with the absence of love. When the breaking came and I didn't stop it, you wondered, was he still watching? Did he care? You tried to be strong. You told yourself all the right spiritual things. But deep beneath the surface, you began to protect yourself even from me. Not because you hated me, but because you feared I might let it happen again. But here is my truth. I was never the one who broke you. I was the one who caught you as you fell. I was the one who stood between you and despair. I was the one who buried strength inside your weakness so you could rise when rising seemed impossible. Yes, I could have stopped it all. But if I had, you wouldn't have discovered what cannot be taken from you, my presence within you. Because what I build in you is never at the mercy of what people break around you. The work I do in the deep places is not undone by betrayal, abandonment, or even loss. You've looked around and asked, why did they walk away? Why didn't they fight for me? Why did I have to lose so much just to find peace? And though I will never minimize your grief, I want to reveal something holy through it. The weight they dropped. I never asked you to carry. The room they exited was not the place I intended to keep you. The space that was emptied is now the space I'm filling. And child, I'm filling it not with performance, but with presence. Not with illusions of control, but with truth that holds even when everything else lets go. What once broke you tried to make you believe you were fragile. But the truth is, fragility didn't bring you here. Endurance did. The truth is, pain didn't erase your value. It revealed your substance. Anyone can shine in peace. But you endured the darkness. You stayed when it would have been easier to run. You loved when it hurt. You kept showing up even when your name was forgotten in rooms you once helped build. So let's be honest. Part of what broke your heart wasn't just the pain itself. It was the silence that followed it. The lack of acknowledgement. The way your sacrifice went unnoticed. The way your kindness was mistaken for weakness. And worst of all, the internal voice that said, maybe they were right. Maybe I really don't matter as much as I thought. But I'm silencing that voice now. Not by overpowering it, but by outlasting it. I will drown it in waves of truth so steady that no accusation can stand. I'm speaking louder, not in volume, but in resonance. I will remind you again and again, until the lie no longer fits in your spirit. You are not forgotten. You are not replaceable. You are not left behind. You are seen. You are carried. You are commissioned. I'm going to use what tried to break you, not only to restore your soul, but to anoint your steps. The very places you were wounded will become the places you carry healing. You will walk through rooms with a different weight now, not a burden, but a presence. Not pressure, but power. The kind of power that comes from someone who no longer performs to be accepted. The kind of authority that only emerges from brokenness that has been redeemed, not erased. You will speak gently, and it will pierce through noise. You will listen deeply, and people will feel seen again. You will move slowly, and still carry more impact than others who run ahead. Because I'm not sending you forward as someone who is chasing relevance. I'm sending you as someone who knows what cannot be shaken. This is how I build my kingdom. Through those who thought they were too wounded to be used. Through those who stopped trying to impress and started learning to abide. Through those who are no longer hungry for recognition, but desperate for truth. You're one of those, and I'm placing something on your life that will not look like the platform you once imagined, but it will carry eternal weight. You thought the breaking was the end, but it was a beginning. Not the kind that starts with noise and lights, but the kind that starts with a whisper in your spirit and grows quietly into strength that cannot be stolen. You're not the aftermath of pain. You're the beginning of legacy. And I will use what tried to break you, not in spite of it, but because of it. I want you to take a deep breath and look at your own story, not through the lens of shame or regret, but through the lens of grace. That's right, grace. Not luck, not coincidence, not resilience alone, but grace that followed you into every shadowed place. Grace that preserved what the world overlooked. Grace that kept the embers alive when even you were convinced it was over. Do you see it now? You weren't just surviving. You were being sustained. Even when it felt like everything meaningful slipped through your fingers, even when the years felt like they passed with nothing to show, even when your strength was worn thin and your dreams collapsed under the weight of discouragement, I was there. Not as an observer, but as a builder, a protector, a father, The foundation beneath your cracked confidence wasn't broken. It was being deepened. There were days you thought, if I could just go back, if I could undo this one moment, maybe I wouldn't feel so far behind. But I don't measure your future by the mistakes you regret. I measure it by the calling I placed on you before your first breath. I do not change my mind about what I've spoken over you. I do not revoke my promises just because your heart was broken in the process. The detours didn't disqualify you. They deepened your capacity to carry what's next. Because what I'm doing in you now requires more than surface joy. It requires someone who's been undone and rebuilt, someone who has learned the cost of truth, someone who has watched a part of their identity fall apart, only to realize that what collapsed wasn't the truth. It was the expectation. And now you're standing in the clarity of what matters most. My presence, my voice, my promises that never shifted, even when you did. You see, I don't operate on the same timelines that people expect of you. I'm not looking at your life and shaking my head, wishing you had done more, been more, proved more. I'm not watching the clock. I'm tending the roots. And some roots take longer to grow because the fruit they will bear is not ordinary. It's not for a fleeting moment. It's not for applause. It's for impact. It's for generations. And that kind of fruit can only grow from a heart that stayed soft even after it bled. Yes, you've lost things, but you've also gained something most people never find: depth. You've learned to sit in silence without assuming you were abandoned. You've learned to keep walking even without clear signs. You've learned to choose hope even when it felt naive. And every single one of those lessons will now become a lamp to someone else who is walking the same dark path you once thought would bury you. Because I'm not just healing you for your own sake. I'm healing you to send you. I'm healing you so that your life becomes a witness to others who feel like they've gone too far, waited too long, broken too deeply. And when they encounter you, they won't meet a person reciting polished phrases. They'll meet someone who understands, someone who has been there, someone whose eyes carry light, not because life was easy, but because truth endured. I want you to hear me now. You don't have to fear being seen again. I know that visibility came with pain before. I know that being known came with betrayal. I know that loving out loud felt like exposure. But this time, I will protect what I reveal. This time, I will guard the space I place you in. You're not being sent out into the world to survive. You're being sent to restore. And your restoration will make others believe that maybe, just maybe, they haven't lost everything either. And child, I haven't just been preparing a new path. I've been preparing a new pace. One that flows with peace, not panic. One that is led by presence, not pressure. I'm not asking you to run to catch up. I'm asking you to walk with me again. Slowly if you must. Quietly if you prefer. But with me. That's the only pace I bless. Because it's not speed that brings fruit. It's abiding. You will see doors open again, but this time you won't walk through them hoping they affirm your worth. You already know who you are now. That's the difference. And when people try to define you by your past, you will no longer shrink. You'll smile. Because what once humiliated you has become the very thing I've anointed in you. There's no shame left to hide. You've walked through the fire, and you didn't come out charred. You came out marked, purified, stronger, truer, and this is how the world will know me. Not through polished perfection, but through stories like yours. Stories where grace stepped in, where pain didn't win, where what tried to break you became the very thing I used to show others, that nothing, absolutely nothing is stronger than the love I have for my children. So let the past breathe, let it settle. Don't carry it like chains, carry it like evidence. Evidence of my goodness, evidence of survival, evidence of divine reversal. Because what was meant to bury you, I'm turning into seed, and I will water it. I will nurture it. I will bring beauty out of it. What tried to break you won't define you, it will lift you, and through you, I will lift others. Let's talk now about the shift that's already begun. Not the kind that comes with dramatic fanfare or sudden resolution, but the kind that builds quietly, like dawn. You may not even recognize it yet, but something has changed. The ground beneath your feet feels a little more stable. The inner panic you used to wake up with, it's growing quieter. The ache that once paralyzed you, it's becoming purpose. This is what healing sounds like. Not always loud or obvious, but unmistakably holy. I'm not asking you to pretend the pain never happened. I'm asking you to see that it no longer holds the pen. The wound is no longer writing the next chapter. I am. You've spent too long feeling like your story was hijacked by sorrow, as if the best you had to offer was trapped in a version of you that no longer exists. But here's the truth. The version of you that made it through, that's the one I'm using now. Not the one who got everything right. Not the one who felt strong every day. The one who stayed. The one who kept walking when they had every reason to stop. And now, I want to teach you how to live from this new place. Not guarded, but grounded. Not bracing for disappointment, but believing in restoration. You see, pain has a way of training your heart to anticipate loss. But I'm retraining your spirit to anticipate goodness. I'm shifting your reflex from self-protection to trust. Because you're no longer in danger. You're in my care. And in my care, nothing is wasted and nothing is random. You've spent so long asking, how do I rebuild? And my answer is this. You don't rebuild alone. I will guide each step. I will show you what to pick back up and what to leave behind. Some things you thought were essential were only meant to carry you through a past season. You're not going back there. You're not called to recreate what was. You're called to recognize what is becoming. And becoming takes different tools, a different posture, a different rhythm. Don't fear starting small. Some of the most powerful movements begin in obscurity. Some of the most lasting changes begin in stillness. So when I whisper, rest here, don't argue. When I say, speak now, don't hold back. I will tune your heart to my pace because I'm not rushing you. I'm aligning you. This is not about returning to some former version of strength. This is about learning to live as someone who trusts that I'm strong enough for both of us. Let me ask you something sacred now. Can you forgive the version of yourself that didn't know how to carry all this before? The one who snapped under pressure? The one who doubted? The one who broke? You don't need to keep punishing them. That version of you did their best. And I honored it. I covered it. I held it in tenderness. Forgiveness isn't permission to forget. It's permission to heal. And part of healing is letting go of the need to keep apologizing for being human. Yes, you've changed. You're not as quick to speak. You're more cautious with your trust. You don't open your heart as easily. That's okay. There's wisdom in your scars now. But don't let caution become isolation. Don't let self-protection become your new identity. I'm calling you to connection again, not just with others, but with me. And the version of connection I'm offering won't drain you. It won't exploit your tenderness. It won't require you to shrink or perform. It will feel like safety, like truth, like home. I want to reintroduce you to yourself, the one who still loves deeply, even if quieter now, the one who still hopes, even if that hope is more guarded, the one who still believes in beauty, not because life has always been beautiful, but because grace made beauty out of brokenness. You haven't lost who you were. You've uncovered who you really are. This is not a return, it's a revelation. a revealing of what was buried beneath the weight of old expectations, a lifting of the pressure to be what others needed you to be, a resurrection of identity that isn't tied to applause, productivity, or constant strength. This is who I've always seen, the real you, the one who cries in secret and still chooses to show up, the one who feels deeply and still loves freely, the one who wrestles and still believes, I will use that you, and I will give you joy again. Not the kind that depends on everything being in place, the kind that arises without warning, even in quiet moments, the kind that visits like a breeze and stays like a friend, the kind that reminds you you're not just surviving anymore, you're living. That's what I'm leading you into, not just recovery, but life, full, rooted, purposeful life. Let me be clear, I don't need your perfection. I need your presence. I need your willingness. I need your yes. And that yes doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be confident. It just has to be real. Whisper it if you must, but don't silence it. Because when you say yes to me again, even with trembling hands, even with uncertainty still lingering, I begin to move. I begin to open doors you thought were locked forever. I begin to gather the pieces you gave up on. I begin to breathe on the dreams you shelved out of fear. And I begin to show you that you were never forgotten. You were just being prepared. What tried to break you had an assignment. But so do I. And mine is stronger, more enduring, eternal. The pain wanted to make you disappear. But I've chosen to make you visible, not as a project, not as someone who needs to prove anything, but as someone who carries heaven in the cracks. And I will use you, not someday, but now, because you're ready in ways you don't even realize yet. Now that your heart is beginning to steady again, let's speak about what comes next, not as a burden to carry, but as a commission to walk in. Because, child, I didn't rescue you just to leave you resting in survival. I restored you so you could rise. And this rising will not look like the desperate sprint of someone trying to make up for lost time. It will look like the steady, rooted walk of someone who knows who they are and knows who walks beside them. You don't have to earn your way back into usefulness. You never left it. You don't need to prove you're strong again. You've already been strong in the most sacred way, not in appearance, but in persistence. That quiet strength, the one that chose to keep breathing when everything felt broken, that's the strength I'm now using as a vessel for my glory. You were not abandoned in the fire. You were forged in it. So now I ask you, are you ready to be seen again? Not seen as a performance, but as a presence. Not seen for what you can do, but for who you carry, me. Because that's what the world is desperate for. Not more impressive resumes, not more polished personalities, but authentic presence. People who have walked through hell and still speak with hope. People who have grieved deeply and still extend mercy. People who know the ache of loneliness and still choose connection. People like you. There will be moments ahead where you're tempted to disqualify yourself again. Moments when insecurity creeps in and tells you you're still too messed up, too wounded, too inconsistent. But I want you to remember this. I have never once chosen someone because they were flawless. I've always chosen the ones who stayed available. Moses doubted himself. David wept and failed. Elijah ran away. Peter denied. And yet I used them, not after they cleaned themselves up, but while they were still wrestling. Why? Because their hearts were still open to me, just like yours is. I'm not asking you to lead with perfection. I'm inviting you to lead with presence. When you speak, let it be with the authority of someone who knows pain, but also knows promise. When you walk into a room, don't shrink. Bring me with you. Your scars are not a distraction. They are evidence. Your limp is not a weakness. It is a sign you've walked through something sacred and survived. I will use it all. I will waste nothing. But hear me. This next season will require you to live as someone who believes they are already accepted, because if you still believe you have to earn belonging, you'll exhaust yourself performing. And I didn't restore you for exhaustion. I restored you for overflow. The oil I'm placing on you now flows from intimacy, not striving. It will anoint your words, your rest, your decisions, your presence, not because you've perfected your life, but because you've surrendered it. Let's be honest. Part of you is afraid to hope again. You've hoped before and been disappointed. You've trusted and been let down. You've prayed and waited, sometimes in silence so long it echoed. And now, as you begin to feel light again, joy again, vision again, that old voice says, don't get your hopes up. But I say get them up. Not in naivete, but in confidence. Not in your plan, but in my character. You're not placing your hope in outcomes anymore. You're placing your hope in me. And I do not disappoint. I may not always move the way you expect, but I always move with purpose. I always move with love. And I always move with you in mind. There are seeds I planted in you years ago that are just now beginning to break the surface. You thought they died, but they were only buried. Dormant, yes. Forgotten, no. And as I breathe on them now, you'll feel old passions return. But they'll sound different. Not rushed, not frantic, not pressure-filled. They will come back with peace. That's how you'll know it's me. Peace will be the signal. You will begin to feel drawn to places and people you thought were no longer part of your story. Not because you're being pulled backward, but because I'm redeeming the unresolved. There are things you didn't get to finish. Conversations you didn't get to have. Moments you lost without explanation. I'm not reopening old wounds. I'm closing them properly, with grace, with clarity, with freedom. And you'll begin to recognize the reason why the breaking was so deep, because the calling is so weighty. You were never meant for shallow places. That's why surface-level living has never satisfied you. You've always been drawn to more. Not more fame, but more meaning. Not more recognition, but more realness. That's why I've trusted you with the journey you've had. Because when the dust settles, I know you'll point back to me. And I will confirm your steps. Not all at once, but enough to keep you moving. You'll hear it in the voice of someone who says, your words change something in me. You'll feel it in the peace that settles when you make the hard decision. You'll sense it in the alignment of doors you didn't even knock on. That's not coincidence. That's covenant. That's my favor moving with you, not because of your effort, but because of your willingness to be still when it mattered most. So stand tall again, not in arrogance, but in assurance. You're not standing as someone who merely survived. You're standing as someone who has been trusted with fire and came out with glory on their skin. You're standing as someone who knows the weight of grace, and the world needs that now more than ever. What tried to break you didn't win. I did. And because of that, now you do too. Now that the dust has settled and the weight has begun to lift, it's time to understand something deeper. You're not just recovering from what hurt you. You're being redefined by what I healed in you. This is no longer a season of patchwork repairs. This is a complete rewiring of identity from the inside out. Because what tried to break you didn't just fail, it backfired. It revealed what was unshakable. And now I'm building on that. I'm not asking you to pretend you weren't affected. I'm inviting you to live as someone who has been transformed. You can honor what happened without being trapped in it. You can acknowledge the grief without building a home inside it. You can remember what broke you without bowing to it. I've already broken the power of that season, not just its events, but its influence over you. It doesn't get to shape your future anymore. I do. You're not just someone who made it out. You are someone who is carrying something holy from what tried to destroy you. And that something is beginning to emerge in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you see others. You've always been sensitive, but now your sensitivity is laced with discernment. You've always had compassion, but now your compassion is anchored in truth. You've always longed for peace, and now you carry it, even when chaos tries to creep back in. This is what happens when you let me work in the places no one else could reach. This is what happens when you allow me access to not just your behavior, but your beliefs. Because that's where most of the damage was done. Not just in your circumstances, but in the quiet beliefs that grew from them. The ones that said, I'm not enough, I'm not seen, I'm too much, I'm too late, I'm no longer valuable. These were not just thoughts, they were agreements. And one by one, I'm breaking them. Because what you agree with, you live out of. And too long, you lived from the residue of lies that didn't come from me. But now, I'm renewing the script. Not with inspirational fluff, but with eternal truth. The kind that doesn't shift with your mood. The kind that doesn't require applause to hold its power. The kind that speaks just as clearly in silence as it does in the spotlight. That's the kind of truth I'm planting deep in your soul now. Truth that can't be shaken. You've always thought of strength as something loud, something public, something recognized. But what I've taught you, and what I'll continue to teach you, is that true strength often moves in stillness. It flows through consistency, not noise. Through mercy, not performance. Through presence, not pressure. You are becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to chase validation anymore, because you know where you belong and whose you are. And now I want to remind you of something you haven't dared to consider in a long time. You're allowed to dream again. Yes, dream. Not just survive, not just function, not just fulfill responsibilities, but actually dream. To imagine life beyond fixing the broken pieces. To imagine building something new, something alive, something sacred, something joyful. This is not a cruel suggestion. It is a divine invitation. The ability to dream again is not a reward for your endurance. It's a result of your healing. Let me show you how to dream differently this time. Not from fear, but from freedom. Not to prove anything, but to express what's been restored in you. You don't need to chase a version of success that someone else defined. I have dreams for you that flow from your true identity, the one I've been revealing in these quiet months. You're not here to replicate what others have done. You're here to release what only you carry. You're not behind. I need to say that again. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're not too slow. You're not underqualified. You're right on time for what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now is new. That's why the old paths don't feel like home anymore. That's why the old ways of thinking are falling apart. That's why you can't force yourself to fit into the expectations you once lived under, because they were never meant to hold the real you that's emerging now. You have permission to rebuild, not according to pressure, but according to peace. You can say no to what drains you. You can step away from what no longer honors your soul. You can walk with boundaries and still be full of love. These are not signs of rebellion. They are signs of alignment. You are learning to live in a way that reflects who I actually created you to be, not who life taught you to become in survival mode. And as you begin to live from this healed identity, you'll notice that your impact shifts. You won't always be louder, but you'll be clearer. You won't always be visible, but you'll be undeniable. You won't always be celebrated, but you'll be anchored. And from that anchoring, I will move through you in ways that feel effortless. You'll step into rooms and bring peace. You'll sit with people and bring healing. You'll write or speak or create, Not because you have to, but because it overflows from what I've already done in you. You've carried many things you weren't meant to, and now I'm handing you back what was always yours: clarity, joy, rest, purpose. Not as a reward you had to earn, but as a return to your design. So walk on. The path is clear, the burden is light. The story isn't finished, and I'm not just going to use what tried to break you. I already am. You've reached the place in your journey where the voice of your pain no longer has the final word, where the memory of the breaking no longer dictates your boundaries, where fear has started to lose its grip. Not because them stopped speaking, but because you stopped listening. And that shift, that internal courage to stop agreeing with old lies and start agreeing with truth, that's the moment everything changes. You've lived long enough in survival mode, and now I'm inviting you into authority. Not the kind you wear like a badge, not the kind that requires performance or position. I'm talking about quiet authority, earned in the fire, sealed by surrender, and carried in stillness. It's the kind that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere, not with volume, but with presence. My presence in you. There are people you'll encounter who will never know the full story of what you've walked through, and they don't need to. They'll sense it in your eyes. They'll feel it in your peace. They'll hear it in the weight of your words. What once brought you shame will now give you compassion. What once silenced you will now give you discernment. What once made you feel invisible will now allow others to be seen through your eyes. That's why I allowed the delay, because I wasn't just preparing what you would carry, but how you would carry it, without bitterness, without ego, without fear. I've watched you surrender layer after layer, the need to be understood, the urge to be right, the craving to be validated. And now that so much has been stripped away, what remains is pure, and pure vessels carry power. There's an anointing on your life now that wasn't there before, not because I love you more, but because you're able to hold it now. You've been tempered, refined, pressed, and because of that, you can walk in rooms you would have once crumbled in. You can carry assignments that once would have broken you. You can stand under pressure that used to make you shake. Why? Because your identity is no longer tethered to performance. It's rooted in belonging. Let me tell you something sacred. The pain wasn't your purpose, but it did reveal it. Because now, when you speak, you'll speak to real things. You'll recognize the sound of hidden grief in others. You'll sense the weight people are carrying, even when they smile. You'll move with precision, with mercy, with confidence that doesn't come from human affirmation, but from knowing you were rebuilt by God Himself. You're a carrier of restoration now, not because you read the right things or rehearsed the right responses, but because you lived through the breaking and didn't lose your ability to love. You chose forgiveness when bitterness would have made more sense. You chose hope when despair seemed easier. You chose truth when silence felt safer. And every one of those choices became a brick in the foundation I'm now building on. So listen carefully. This isn't just about your healing anymore. It's about your commissioning. You've been asking, what now, God? What do I do with all this pain I've carried? And here is my answer. You pour it. Not recklessly, not all at once, but intentionally. With me. You pour it through your words, through your art, through your quiet presence in someone else's chaos. You pour it by showing up with gentleness in rooms that used to trigger your defenses. You pour it by becoming a living contradiction to what tried to crush you. Because when you show up, healed in places you were once wounded, hell loses ground. You were never just a survivor. You were always a seed. And now, that seed is growing into something the world needs, urgently. Your story isn't just inspirational, it's prophetic. It announces what's possible when someone lets me have access to the deepest parts of their pain, It announces what happens when surrender becomes a lifestyle, not a last resort. It announces the kind of transformation that no program, no applause, no platform can produce. Only presence. And that's what people will encounter when they're with you. Not just your personality, not your cleverness, not even your strength. They'll encounter me. Because now, I'm not just something you reach for. I'm someone you walk with. We are one. You in me and I in you. That's not a theological statement. That's a reality now living in your rhythm, your responses, your relationships. You will begin to notice that you're no longer desperate to explain yourself. That's because you've stopped living for permission and started walking in position. You are positioned now in your spirit, in your authority, in your story. You're standing not as someone hoping to belong, but as someone sent. Sent into a world gasping for the very grace that brought you back to life. And yes, this season will stretch you. Yes, it will require more trust, but not the kind that exhausts you, the kind that liberates you. You won't be performing. You'll be flowing. You won't be striving. You'll be responding. That's the power of alignment. That's what happens when a once broken heart becomes a well of living water, not because the scars disappeared, but because the spirit remained. So step forward, fully, freely, without apology, without shrinking, without delay. You've been given something weighty and beautiful, and the world needs what you carry now, not the cleaned-up version of your story, but the holy one. The version where God met you in the dark and didn't leave. The version where love won when bitterness almost took over. The version where what tried to break you became the very place I showed myself strong. And I'm not finished yet. Look at you now, still standing, still breathing, but more than that, still willing to believe again, willing to trust, willing to be seen not through the eyes of who you once were, but through the clarity of who you're becoming. The road here wasn't easy. It wasn't linear, and it wasn't fair, but it was worth it. Because who you are today could only be shaped by what you survived with me. I never asked you to enjoy the breaking, but I did ask you to let me meet you there, and you did. That yes, whispered through tears, offered through shaking hands, sometimes only visible through the way you kept showing up. That's what moved me. That's what allowed me to do in you what no one else could, rebuild you from within, not as a copy of your old self, but as a true expression of my heart. Now listen closely, because this is where it turns. You are ready, not because you feel confident every day, not because everything makes sense yet, not because you've reached some perfect level of spiritual maturity. You're ready because your heart is no longer chained to the lie that your worth depends on your performance. You've been unhooked from shame, untangled from the voices that said your best days were behind you. You've been freed from the internal sentence that whispered, "Too late, too broken, too small." That sentence has been overturned. I've declared you available, anointed, alive in purpose. And I don't just speak over you, I walk with you into the new season, into the open doors, into the assignments that match your healing, into the relationships that will hold your wholeness, into the rooms where your voice will carry not just words, but weight. Because now, your presence comes with presence. The wilderness you endured wasn't just a test, it was an equipping. Every lonely step, every silent night, every uncelebrated act of obedience, they were seeds. Seeds sown in the soil of trust. Seeds that are now breaking through in power. And even though the world hasn't seen the full harvest yet, heaven already has. And I smile at what I see. Because I don't just see what you do, I see who you are when no one is watching. I see how you chose kindness when it cost you. How you forgave when you never received an apology. How you stayed soft when you could have turned bitter. How you brought peace to rooms that had forgotten what peace felt like. And none of it went unnoticed. None of it was in vain. So now walk with your head held high. Not in arrogance, not in defense, in belonging. You are no longer the one trying to earn your place at the table. You are the table. You carry what others have been praying for. And it's not your strength they need. It's your story. It's your surrendered heart. It's the fragrance of grace on your life that can't be faked or manufactured. I didn't bring you through all this just to place you back where you started. I'm not recycling your past. I'm resurrecting your purpose. And it looks different now. It moves differently. It breathes differently. But it's no less powerful. In fact, it's finally pure. You'll begin to notice it soon. The divine alignments, the peaceful yes, the closing of doors that used to torment you, the return of vision that feels like breath after drowning. These are signs. Not that the hard days are over, but that you're walking in authority now. And authority doesn't mean control. It means clarity. It means peace. It means intimacy with me that cannot be shaken. You don't need to fear falling behind anymore. I've brought you into a rhythm of grace, and in this rhythm, nothing is wasted, and everything is redeemed. You won't miss what's meant for you, and what's not meant for you will quietly fall away. Not as punishment, but as protection. I'm streamlining your path, pruning your pace, guarding your oil. You are entering a season where impact will not come from effort, but from alignment. The more you stay close to me, the more your life will echo heaven. The more you rest in who you are, the more others will find rest through you. You become a resting place for my spirit, a lighthouse for those still lost in storms. And you didn't become that by trying harder. You became that by letting me rebuild you. So now go. Go not as someone unsure of their place, but as someone sent. Go not as someone begging to be used, but as someone already chosen. Go not as someone waiting for the pain to make sense, but as someone who has seen what I can do with ashes. Go as someone who finally knows what tried to break you was the very thing I used to prepare you. Amen. And if these words found you where your pain still speaks louder than hope, let this be your moment of return, not to who you were, but to who you're becoming. Share this message with someone still standing in the rubble, wondering if anything beautiful can rise again. Let them hear it through your voice, through your story. God still rebuilds. Grace still finds us. And what tried to break us will never have the last word. You're not just loved, you're called. You still belong here, and now it's time to live like it.